Hey, I'm glad you all showed up. I was thinking, oh, okay, I'm gonna start recording a 30-minute overview. Okay, you didn't let me off the hook that time, right? All right, so you all get situated, grab your drinks, grab your snacks, and tonight's discussion, we are going to talk about grief and loss. So I know it's a really heavy topic, and depending on how much you share is basically how we're going to move through tonight's discussion. So I usually do like an interactive approach, and I like to use Mentimeter sometimes. I was trying to include the add-in on my PowerPoint, but it would not work. So um, you're welcome to use the chat. You're welcome to come off mute. You're welcome to turn on your cameras if you like to. It's all up to you. Oh, hi, Kristen. I appreciate your comment. You're so awesome. And by the way, I turned off all the filters on Zoom, so it's not a filter. I know you can tell when people put their filter on. Um, so I want you all to take some time. I know that this discussion might provoke some further thoughts. I like to use like a journal. So if you have something available, like this journal, um, or even just a piece of paper, like you could just get a regular notebook paper and write it down. And if you want to get rid of it, it's easy. You can tear it up or burn it or however you like to do that. I know sometimes our traditional beliefs, you don't burn your things or your thoughts. So you take care of yourself how you need to, okay? First disclaimer I'd like to tell you all is, um, you know, I don't mean to cause any harm. And I want to first say that some things I do might come across maybe different, or maybe I said something and you all don't do it that way, and that's okay. You can tell me, you can let me know and say, our tribe does it this way, and I'm totally fine with that. Um, And so just be aware that my words might come across differently. I'm in the Southwest. I know some of you all up north or to the east might say things or have different meanings to words. And so just be aware that I'm not here to cause any harm or offend. So I'm going to try to work my PowerPoint as best I can. Sometimes it's a little weird and wonky, so I'm going to try my hardest. While I'm doing that, I just want to do a brief introduction of myself. She'e kia ane na tachi ni ba shin tabaha ada shiche do twitch eat ada shanala akutasa do ma shlan. So I am Towering House. I'm born for Red Running into the Water clan. My maternal grandfathers are um, Edgewater, and my paternal grandfathers are Bitterwater. So I'm originally from the southwestern part of the Navajo Nation, specifically Lower Greasewood, Arizona, and I was born on the reservation, raised partially on the reservation, and grew up in the border towns of that border Navajo Nation. So I'm based in Winslow, Arizona right now, go between here and Flagstaff, Arizona. Um, like I said, I'm a mother. I have three daughters that range from 6 to 24. And so she's actually in college now. So sometimes I'll sit down and talk with her about some of these things that we discuss. And, in my full-time position, my full-time work, I serve as a technical assistant, training and um, technical coordinator and work with tribal entities across the nation. So we could be do trainings, we could be doing Gathering of Native Americans, which is a 4-day curriculum. We could be going in and doing some type of GONA with different audiences, whether that's a team at a workplace or it's community or it's youth driven or community driven. It all depends on what tribes need. So that's a little bit about me. I'm so welcome to the gathering that we call the Mental Health Wellness Circles. So that is what it was on the flyer, and today's topic is grief and loss. So I want you all to do your own introductions. I know sometimes it feels weird doing our introductions, right? If you could put your name, put your tribe band um, in the chat or your family name. You can put in your hometown. You can also put in your college. And I know that a lot of us have different areas of focus, and that would be greatly appreciated. And write about an awesome connection that you made this week, whether that's a spiritual connection or a physical connection, emotional connection, an artistic connection. It could be any area that you choose. Um, write about it, let me know about it. I'm hoping it's positive and upbeat, and if it's not, that's okay. You're welcome to share here. Um, we're going to go through some discussion on norms and what we would like to see from one another. Okay, so we'll talk about that here shortly, but provide your introduction, your name, your tribe, your clan. And I said my clan earlier, and I'm the Navajo, if you didn't figure that out already. And I provided my hometown. My colleges, I just want to go through this a little bit. I received my bachelor's from my undergrad from Northern Arizona University, and then I went to get my MSW at Arizona State University. So it's a little bit about me, and my area of focus is social work. So I've been doing social work for almost 20 years, and more specifically advocating for children, youth, and families, and about 10 years working with suicide prevention, grants, just anything related to grants, grant writing, grant implementation, just everything under the grant world, grant reviewing. And so in my social work career, just doing as much as I can. And we talk a little bit about that, doing as much as we can, right? Because some of us are helpers, and that's just a natural ingrained part of our culture is to naturally just help, right? When somebody asks for help, we do it. And sometimes that can cause burnout. Um, we talk a lot about self-care, we talk about mental health, and I want to emphasize mental health because that piece is often discarded, it's disregarded, um, and it's given this negative stigma, right? So I want you all to just take that in. Um, we talk about grief and loss and a lot of the ways that it's seen, a lot of the ways that it's felt. And so we'll go through that. I can't see the chat real quick. Let me try to make the screen a little bit bigger. And we can see if you put anything in the chat. Does anybody want to come off mute? I know everyone wants to come off mute and share. I love that. If you all want to write down your connection, you're welcome to. And I always like to say, note the other individuals in the chat. look at where each one of you comes from, take note of the professions, because I kid you not, like I remember people I ran into like years ago on either a conference or like these days it's easier to get on virtual calls, right? And so it's easier to connect today. Like 20 years, 25 years ago, it was really hard, right? You have to be in person to see people, or you were on a conference phone call, right? Um, so take note of each other, and yeah, I'm pretty sure you might run into each other sooner or later. Um, especially if you're in the same field. And I want you all to provide input as we move through this presentation of this wellness circle. We're going to start talking and sharing, and you're welcome to put in the chat, some thoughts that you have. It could help others try to navigate their grief and loss and or their mental health healing journey. Um, Also encouragement. So when I first came to this work and was trained as a GONA facilitator, which is Gathering of Native Americans, about 10 years ago, I came across, that awesome saying of you are worthy. So a lot of the times we as Native people, this was how I was as a kid. I was shy, I didn't want to talk to anyone, I didn't want to see anyone, I didn't want to raise my voice in class, I didn't want to read. I just did not want to open my mouth and share my voice, right? And there's many reasons for that. And I look at our children today and they're becoming more vocal. They're even our younger adults, which you might be in that category. Um, they're showing us, they're teaching us, they're standing up and advocating for us. And that's really awesome to see. And so a lot of the times we don't give enough encouragement to those who are either fighting for us or who might be struggling or just your neighbor next door, right? And we don't tell them, hey, how are you doing? Have a good day. Or, um, just making those little greetings and providing some encouragement. So during this time with the wellness circles, I'd like you to provide some words of encouragement. Go over to the chat and thank someone for sharing, or hey, I've been to, you know, North Dakota. I know where that's at, or um, um, any type of words of encouragement. So, or awesome job, thanks for doing that. Um, take that time to do that. And if someone provides a statement in regards to, something further along in the presentation or the wellness circle, go ahead and provide your encouragement, okay? So we're going to move into welcoming each one of you to the circle. Like I said, um, if we were in person, we would be able to see each other. We would all be sitting around, probably telling jokes. I know that's my favorite part. But also seeing each other eye to eye, and also, I think the circle, it's a very powerful place and space to be in. Um, what I really like about it is that no person is at the head of the room. We're all together in the same format. Um, and that gives an indicator that no one is greater than the other, right? If I were in person, I might get up to write things on the tear sheet just to kind of focus on a word. Um, that's the purpose of you are worthy in that statement there. I know that we all need a safe space, especially talking about grief and loss, right? So, if you want to put in the chat some of those things that you need to create that safe space, but also what you need to keep others accountable for And so when we come together, we establish a sense of norms, which is guidelines that we hold for ourselves, but for others, and to create that safety. All right. So some of those areas that I often see are respect. And so how kind of think about this, how do you encourage and or give respect, right? What does that look like? Um, trust. What does trust look like? I know it's an interesting topic. It's an interesting word, but what does that look like to you? How does someone create trust with you? How do you maintain trust? It's a really good question. So think about that as we move into sharing. I know that trust can be a really huge thing to build with people who have been through trauma, who have been experiencing um, neglect or abuse or domestic violence or any of those um, areas. And so take a look at that. And I would suggest that you pull out a paper uh, or your journal. I've always loved journals, like since elementary school. Like I'd have like 10 journals and nothing to do, right? But you just doodle in them and put stickers on there. So pull out your journals or your sheet of paper or your phone. If you have the notes app, I use that a lot to make, just write down notes for myself. Some of these questions you can start to think about. What does respect look like for me? What does trust look like for me? Honesty. How am I being honest with myself and others? Being non-judgmental. Am I judgmental? We're all judgmental, right? But does it cause harm to others? Being mindful of others? Are you mindful of others? And how do you do that? How do you showcase that you are mindful of others? Boundaries, understanding that we all have boundaries and that it's okay that, you know, if you want to enforce your boundaries, that's okay. But knowing and understanding, do I have boundaries? Asking myself that. Compassion, having compassion for others, listening, making sure that we're engaged. We're experiencing that active listening, which means we might have to clarify by asking a question. Acceptance, knowing that we're all different. We come from different walks of life. We come from different places, different spaces, different teachings, different customs, different cultures in terms of the way we do things, right? Um, and so having that open mind and then no letdowns, no put downs, maybe provide some solutions to those who are in need. Someone might put in the chat that they're dealing with some things and encouragement and or something that might have helped me, you could put in the chat too. Like, maybe someone's having a hard time with studying and focusing. What helps you to study and focus? You could add that. So, forward thinking, um, that's always awesome and included instead of looking at the past and what has happened. Open-minded, I already kind of covered that one. And then forgiveness. I know sometimes forgiveness is tough. Um, Forgiving others is one thing, right? And that could be hard to forgive others who've done wrong to us. Um, but looking inward and trying to forgive ourselves for something that we've done in our life. You know, I'm not perfect. I've done things in my life that I had to come to that place to say, you know, in order to put it away, in order for it to stop bothering me, stressing me out, or giving me anxiety, I had to come face to face with it and eventually come to forgiveness so I could put it away. Doesn't mean that I'll think about it. I mean, it doesn't mean that I won't think about it. It might pop up here and there, and I might have to talk it out or jot it down, and that's okay. So, those are some of the guidelines for creating a safe space. Do any of you have any suggestions for these norms in establishing a safe space? Okay, don't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to move forward and we're going to talk about uh oh, recap. Okay, so this is basically what we did last week. We didn't go through what did we do last week? We talked about creating healthy boundaries. We talked a little bit about mental health. We talked about the self-assessment and how to identify um, areas of improvement and what is working and what's not working for you. And we talked a little bit about coping and some resources. So, um, yeah. And then I like to include this quote like, we are not perfect and we're always learning and changing. And that is the beauty of each one of these wellness circles is that you're gaining information from me, I'm gaining information from you to address some of these things that we're discussing, such as grief and loss. I see your, okay, I see your comment. I feel like struggle internally without telling anyone. I do not want to burden anyone. Yeah, and coming to terms with that is the first step, right? Recognizing that is the first step. Now, the challenge is how are you going to address that? And really thinking about that. And what I like to do is mind maps. I like to write it down. I'm a visual person. I like to sit and I like to, like I said, journals, right? I'll write down, what are some ways I can get this out? Yes, I struggle internally. Is it going to see a therapist and building that trust with that person? Is it going to see a medicine person that I have trust with and I can talk it out or do some spiritual approaches? Is it talking to a pastor or a person of the church that I connected with already and I trust? It's really about finding that trusted person, I think. It's really identifying why you can't uh, why you can't get to that place, right? Um, so we're going to talk a little bit about, I know that's something that you just brought up, struggling internally without telling anyone and not being able to burden anyone. And I think it's really important that you talk to someone who you have trust with. I know that in the work that I've done, and just being a mother and being a sister, being a cousin, an auntie, a lot of us go through things and we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to tell anyone, right? But how do we cope with it? And I think we've covered this many times. If you want to go back through some of the recordings, we talk about stress management. We talk about creating healthy boundaries. We talk about mental health and wellness. There's a lot of recordings on those things. And if you have trouble creating trust with someone and you just want to talk, there's always the 988 number. Like, I kid you not, you can call them or text them. They will have no idea who you are. And you could just lay out all your problems there. I kid you not. It's the best resource that you could come across. You can dial it from your phone, or you can send a text message. Um, I think it was 711 to home, and you will, or 988, just text that number. You'll come up with some information. and you're able to just lay it all out there. If you rather text message it, that's fine. Um, and right, if you feel like where you're at, that's okay. That's what you want to do, that's okay. That's identifying what you need, right? At that time. Yes, exactly. That's identifying your needs. Um, so we're not perfect. We're always learning and we're always changing. We might be at different levels of healing, and that's okay, right? So we're going to move forward and we're going to talk a little bit about grief. And here is the APA definition of grief, in case you were wondering. I know. We all have different definitions of grief, right? And traditionally and culturally, we might have definitions of grief that were taught to us, um, that were discussed during that time. And everything is done at a specific time, right? Timing is there. And I know that things have changed and evolved, and we talk a little bit more loosely about these things. Um, and I know that at the end, I'll offer some um, do smudge, and you all can leave the meeting in a good way. And so keep that in mind as we move forward that you need to take care of yourself the way you need to. Yes, I encourage that. So the definition of grief is the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually involves the death of a loved person. And grief often includes physiological distress, separation anxiety, confusion, yearning, obsession dwelling on the past, and apprehension about the future. So intense grief can become life-threatening through the disruption of the immune system, self-neglect, and suicidal thoughts. And grief may also take the form of regret for something lost, remorse for something done, or sorrow for a mishap to oneself. Okay? So that's the definition of grief. And without grief, I mean, without love, um, it's kind of like the counterpart to grief, right? Love is an extension of grief, that you love this person who has either walked on or you've loved. It could be anything, right? Grief and loss is basically the loss of anything. It could be, I know that one time I was discussing, I don't remember where I was at, but someone had lost a necklace that was given to them and it had a lot of meaning to them. And just the loss of that object made them sick to their stomach. And so, because they love that item or they love that person that gave it to them, right? And it causes these reactions. So, when thinking about grief, love is basically that extension. Um, and then this few other words, grief is an expression of love and showing how much you care, and then learning to live a new way without blank, right? This is the transition, if you want to say, or this is a way that you're starting to live that new life without that person or in a new way. So that's another way of looking at it. Um, a lot of the times when we talk about grief, we talk about the stages of grief, which Keebler-Ross created this 5 stages of grief, coping with the loss of a loved one. And I included the resource here and I'll include it at the end. But basically going through each of these areas, and talking about it a little bit more and letting you know that some of these things that we experience is okay, all right? That this is normal when it comes to the research that was done studying grief, and that this is what we see from individuals who experience grief and loss. Traditionally and culturally, it might be different for each one of you in the different areas that you come from, and just understand and know that I didn't go too deep on, what culturally what I experience. So I wanted to leave that open-ended for you all to kind of fill in and think about that. Is what are those stages that you go through traditionally or culturally? Okay. So this one, the stage is denial, and it's basically defined as avoidance, avoiding any and all cost of discussion related to the grief and loss, procrastination, forgetting, um, easily distracted, mindless behaviors, keeping busy. Sometimes that if there's, you might notice this when there is a loss of someone, that you always have that person who needs to do something when the news has been broken, right? I need to clean. I need to do the dishes. I need to do this. I need to go shop for this. So if you notice that, you'll see the different stages um, where people are at. Shutting down, you'll notice maybe there's some shock in the person that has denial, numbness, and confusion. And this is not an end all be all. This can change, this can morph, this can look differently. Denial can look differently in each and every one of us. Okay, let's see. Let's go to anger. Whoa. Well, that's not anger. Oh, bargaining. Let's go to bargaining. So, bargaining is basically ruminating in the past, um, ruminating in the future, thinking about what could have been or what happened in the past, overthinking, comparing yourself to others, um, predicting future, assuming the worst, perfectionism, thinking I should have, if only, judgment of others or self, experiencing some guilt, shame, or blame, having some fear, anxiety, insecurity. Um, the one before it should have been anger. And I know some of us have seen that when someone, maybe they lost their job, and that automatic response might be anger. And anger is one of those surface emotions that automatically come up, when someone's feeling. It's kind of that. Sometimes it's used as a mask, and sometimes it's that automatic um, expression. So let's see. Bargaining, depression. And I think this is something that we see sometimes when there is grief and loss and things have kind of calmed down a little bit, and the person might, be um, locked up in their not apartment or home or in their room, their sleep. Maybe they sleep more or sleep less. They might eat more or eat less. They might have reduced energy, social interests, motivations. There might be excessive crying, increased use of alcohol or drugs, and sadness. There might be feelings of despair, hopelessness, and a disappointment, and maybe it's an overall disappointment in self or others, and feeling overwhelmed by everything that's going on and happening, or what the next steps are, feeling overwhelmed with that. And then the other stage is acceptance. Um, and this could look like mindful behaviors, engaging with reality as it is currently, um, and just saying things like, this is how it is right now, being present in the moment, able to be vulnerable with their emotions, being assertive, non-defensive, honest, and engaging in communication, adapting, coping, responding skillfully, um, seeing that it's good enough, everything's good enough, courageous, they're validating things, they might have some self-compassion, and there might be some pride and or some giving of some wisdom and or understanding why in that wisdom piece. Um, just note that all of these stages, they don't follow like a linear path. They might, you might be angry one day, you might be depressed another day, you might be going through some acceptance and then flip back to bargaining. It it's not in a straight line, and it's not to say that, oh, person she was angry yesterday, so she's going to be bargaining tomorrow. No, it's not how it works, right? Oh, she's angry. Check it off. She's done being angry. No, that's not how it works. Sometimes we flip back and forth many times. And that's true. Sometimes when we're making positive changes in our families, sometimes we're alone. Um, and I've seen that happen. I've seen people be ousted or outcasted in their family because they were different or they wanted different things. And that's okay if you want different things. And advocating for your self-care is very important. Intentionally advocating for your health and wellness is self-care. So I commend you for taking that step and to maintain sobriety. I know it's hard in itself, but to go through that makes it even harder. So I thank you for sharing. I wish you all the very best, and I will smudge here in a bit um to kind of put some prayers up and some good thoughts for each one of our journeys. Okay. Which I might as well do that now, right? Don't just talk about it, be about it, right? That's what they say. I want to light this real quick. And I know that we'll be doing this again at the end. And it's so easy to do this in person, but I want you to know that I'm going to do it for you all here as well. So I always like to do this when we're doing in circle. And I know we talk about things that might be a little taboo for some of our tribes, right? We talk about the loss of loved one, we talk about grief and death and dying, and I just want to put that out there that this is for educational and awareness purposes so that we can continue to heal our people. And I know that each one of us struggles in our daily walk, and it might be difficult. That journey might be hard, right? We might walk off that red road a little bit, but we can come back. So understanding that you can make a choice to come back to that road and you can make a choice to step off of it. But all in all, you have the choice to advocate and make good, healthy decisions to maintain your health and your wellness, to ensure that you're here in the future, to ensure that you're here for your children, to ensure that you're here to see your great grandchildren. So I say these words in a good way, and I just want to put that out there that, just letting Creator and our universe know that, we say these words so that we're preventing some of these from happening. Okay? So we're going to move forward, and I want to talk about this briefly. Um, some of my stuff is everywhere, if you can see in the background. Um, so this visual is really cool. I like to incorporate this whenever I talk about wellness, because it has a lot of meaning to it. I am looking at my screen here. That's why I'm looking at. Um, so a lot of us have various medicine wheels in our teachings, right? And you have different ways of referring to them, and they might have different symbols and meaning to it, right? And so I utilize the medicine wheel. You can see that in the circle, the four quadrants. And I use that because it's very sacred to our people, right? The four directions, the four seasons. In our teachings, we have the four sacred mountains. So think about some of your teachings and how those have been passed down to you, and keep those in mind as we talk through this. So in the center, we have the individual, and I like to think that that's you or that's me. Um, and so put yourself in that circle. And on the outside, that first ring that is the medicine wheel, I like to refer to that as the circle of life. And usually we start at the east direction when we have a lot of good meanings for the east, right? It's where the sun rises to start a new day. And it also is a meaning of, the conception when a child's conceived and is growing. And during that time, we're in the womb, we're taking in things, we're learning, we're adjusting, we're changing. And certain things might happen, songs might be said, prayers might be said for you, right? And so we move through that progression. We have birth. There might have been some ceremonies and prayers to welcome you into this world. There might have been celebrations that were had. I would really encourage you to go back to your mom or your dad, your grandma, your grandpa, or your aunties or uncles and ask them about that. That'd be really interesting to hear. What was it like when I was born? Who welcomed me? Who was there? What was said? Because those are powerful words. And I know sometimes we don't have the ability to do that because some of us might come from foster homes, or we might not have our family nearby to do that, and that's okay. Um, so going into when you were born, you eventually learn new things again. You're changing, you're evolving, you become a child, you're entering into adolescence. In that adolescent time, you're learning new things, you're gaining new skills, you're being accustomed to the world and how to do certain things, right? And becoming a young woman or a young man through this puberty process that um, happens, and some of us have different rites of passages when we enter that phase. We might go through different ceremonies or different talkings or teachings. And so when we enter that, we might gain new names, we might gain different symbols. And so moving into young adulthood, into our adulthood, from that little piece right there, we might experience significant times. We might enter relationships. We might um, get married. We might have children. And so these might be different for you. They might be the same for you. And that's okay. And then from there, going into adulthood, and you start adulting, um, you experience different challenges. You're changing still. You're learning new things. And each one of these phases have different meanings, right? You're adapting, you're learning how to be an adult, you're learning how to be an older adult. Um, you're learning how to navigate your children and or grandchildren, right? And so as you move into older adulthood, you're experiencing maybe some physical changes, going through hormonal and or um, health changes, and then into elderhood, where you might be experiencing a lot of different things. I'm not there yet, but just looking at the elders that have been in my life, some of those things that they experience, they're still changing, still evolving, still adapting. Um, and then we eventually complete the circle of life. Um, and we all have different teachings for that and where we journey to and where we go. So I just want to bring that up that it is part of the process. And then if you take a look at the two circles together, this incorporates the 8 components of health. So when we talk about the 8 components of health, they include the intellectual, spiritual, physical, emotional, um, social, financial, environmental, and occupational, which are on the outside of that circle. So those 8 components of health are basically the Western perspectives of what makes us a human being, right? And I understand that that might conflict with our traditional cultural ways, and that's okay. So we're adapting, we're learning. So if you look at that circle on the outside, it has friends, mentors, supports, and families. And it's really interesting to think about our supports, right? Who are the supports in our families? Who are our mentors? Who are our friends? Who are our family members or considered family members? Thinking about them as we think about our health and wellness and how they contribute to that health and wellness. And we talk a lot about setting boundaries. We talk a lot about creating that self-care plan to go through um, a self-inventory of things that we need to improve on. What is working and what is not working? So, what is working? What am I doing good in all of these areas? What needs improvement? I know that we each have something that needs improvement, right? Because we're not perfect. Um, so really identifying that and thinking that through, I usually get again, my journal or a piece of paper, right? My journal, I pull that out and I open it up and I draw a circle and I go through each one of them. I write down each of the 8 components and I write down what I need to do, and it really does help me. Um, Thinking about intellectually, we're all in school, we're all learning, we're all doing trainings. What does that look like now? What's working? What needs improvement? Spiritually, physically. I've I've been nonstop last month, and yesterday I finally went out again after I think 2.5 weeks of not walking, like to do exercise. I finally went out yesterday and it was so nice. And did 2 mile walk. Um, so really recognizing where I need to improve emotionally, what do I need to do? How do I need to take care of my mental health and or process or cope with some of the emotions that I have? Financially, I know sometimes this is a struggle. Um, do I have a budget? Am I being aware of my finances? What does that look like socially? Occupational. Is there something I want to learn that's new and awesome? How are you increasing or enhancing your skills? And then environmentally. And that is a profound area environmentally, right? This is our environment. And as Native Indigenous people, this goes hand in hand with our home, where we come from, where my mom is from, her mom is from, the land, the air, the fire, the water, the earth, right? This is huge and it connects to our culture, our traditions, our way of life, our ceremonies, our prayers, our teachings. And so, what are something that is working and what needs improvement in this area? I'll leave that up to you because this is an area that ties us all together, right? So, I'm going to move forward. You're welcome to do this. You're welcome to screenshot this. You're welcome to use this in your self assessment and creation of your self care plan. Okay. So I want to open this up to you all and talking about how do you cope with grief and loss? If you want to put in the chat, you're welcome to come off mute and share with us some of the ways that you cope with grief and loss. So I'll give you a second to think about that. What are the ways that you cope with grief and loss? Would anybody like to come off mute? You know, that's right. I can attest to that one. Um, so just so you all can get an idea of what exactly I'm asking here. Just to share, I have my youngest brother. He passed away about 2.5 years ago, and he leaves behind a son who's now 20, no, 19, and a daughter that is 16. So, and it was really interesting to see myself when going through the grief and loss of where I stood and how I was responding. Sometimes you can take a self-inventory when you're going through different things and write it down. And sometimes you can go back and you read those and you're like, wow, I was really, struggling during that time. And sometimes when you're in it, you don't realize how much you need, right? Oh, I got it. I can do it myself. Um, Luckily, what helped to kind of move through and navigate through the grief and loss was sharing photos and videos and just talking about funny times that we had. And I was just thinking about my brother and a couple of hours ago, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I gotta tell my nephew the story, right? And I was like, I'll text him. I'll text him the story um later tonight is what I was thinking. So I'm glad you brought that up, Carolina. Um, because it really does help. And I know some of us have some teachings that go into like, oh, you don't talk about that person, you don't bring them back or you're going to keep them here. Um, I know that some teachings that we have, and it's really up to you and your family how you do that. And I'm not going to reinforce that here. It's up to your elders and how you approach and navigate that. A lot of the times we're told, you don't cry, and I used to hear that growing up, you don't cry. Um, but no one understand that it's okay to cry. Okay. So, is there anything else you want to share? How do you cope with grief and loss? Anything else before I move into further discussion? Okay. Well, I'm going to move forward and I'm going to talk about a safety plan. So sometimes we have a safety plan um, that we turn to in our therapy sessions or um, various times when you come across individuals. I just think it's a good idea to have a safety plan. I know at one time, just being a DV survivor, you kind of have to think about what is my safety plan? How do I keep myself safe? Um, so looking at this in terms of our emotional, mental safety, how am I going to keep myself safe? How am I going to cope with life? How am I going to cope with some of these challenges and barriers that come across my path? So I like to think about three individuals that I would call if I need to talk about something. And that can include any trusted individual, any trusted adult, anyone who's maybe an auntie or an uncle that you see as an auntie or uncle, anybody who's a friend or a relative, any trusted person. It could be your success coach. It could be 988. It could be any of those. So I always like to say write down three individuals that you can call, text, or talk to. If you can take the time to write down those three individuals or think about those three individuals that you can call, text, or talk to. I know it's this is a really interesting part because like you said, um, Kristen, having to reach out to someone, it took me a long time to understand that I can talk about what I'm experiencing. it took me a long time to reach that point to where I could trust someone. And it took me some time to realize that you don't have to go through this alone. And so I understand, some of what you're going through, maybe not all of it, because each of our experiences are unique. So if you can, I encourage you because we do not want to go through these challenges alone. We don't want to go through grief and loss alone. We don't want to go through feelings of hopelessness or despair, right? Just identifying those three people. So once you have those three people, keep them in mind. Write them down. Know that you can reach out to them. And maybe having a conversation with them and saying, you know what? I've identified you as one of my go-to people on my safety plan that I can call when I need to talk. Is that okay? What are the responses you're gonna get? It's probably like, oh, yeah, sure, that's fine. Thank you for telling me. And that gives them the heads up that, you know, oh, if they see your name on their phone, let me make sure they're okay. Or they're calling me, let me just tell them, like, I'll call them back. They're being a little courteous and aware that you're part of the plan, right? The safety plan. Okay. The reason I say this is to make sure that we're reaching out. Sometimes it's hard to reach out, right? It's so hard, it's so tough, but it's very important. I always urge individuals that 988 line is available, call it or text it. Reaching out to a trusted adult or a professional that you know that you have resources available to, um, or an urgent care. So I say an urgent care because a lot of our IHS facilities have a behavioral health department, and sometimes they have urgent cares that are open after hours. Some might be only open till like 8 p.m. Um, and if you call 988, they will hook you up with a local call center and or a local crisis center. Um, I know that some places have those and some places don't. I know some places are really rural and they don't have those resources, but at least you make a connection to talk to someone and make sure that you're safe during that time. So reach out if in doubt. This is tips that we've included in here to um, identify a therapist. And so just a few tips. Advocate for what you need, right? Number 7. I won't read them all. And um, here's a prompt for you to go through right now. And I want to say a little bit about what you just said there. So, coming from my perspective, I'm going to speak for myself. Um, but I also want to speak for that male counterpart who's also that strong person, right? So, sometimes our strong Indigenous women and our strong Indigenous men were made strong by the struggle. Yes, I understand that. And sometimes, and a lot of the times, we're in helping fields. We're helpers. We're do this. Boom, 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 boom. Right? We're we're going out and we're helping this person. We're doing this. We're doing that. We're doing that. We're doing that. We're doing that. And sometimes we forget about ourselves. And I say that from my personal experience because at one point, in order to get away from the thoughts and the emotions and the feelings of my life and what I was dealing with at that time, I was a doer. I was like, let's go. Boom, 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 boom. Busy, 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 right? I don't have time for feelings. I don't have time for emotions. I don't have time to deal with that. We'll focus on that later. And that caused physical and emotional reactions to where my body told me, you need to rest and take care of yourself now. Creator made it happen, right? Physically, I had to lay in bed. I had to deal with the migraines. I had to deal with the heart issues. I had to be in bed to heal. And that's when I realized you're doing too much. What about you? Are you taking care of yourself? How are you taking care of yourself, right? And they always say that again and again. You got to take care of yourself to take care of others. And in the field of social work, I know when I was in my BSW program, they would tell me again and again, take care of yourself. Do the self inventory. Identify what are your triggers. Identify what are your stressors. Identify what's bothering you. Focus on your trauma. Start to heal because you can't help anyone until you help yourself. And that was the age old discussion every single class. Self care is important. Even in my work today and with working with my colleagues and supervising individuals, I always tell them, remember your self care. It's very important, right? Yeah, Carolina, that is the hardest part, especially when you are the responsible one. Yep. And I'm preaching to the choir here. Being a single parent at one point in my life for years, for like 8 years of my life, it was tough. And then being like the single parent for another 10 years is really hard. You're carrying all these different things, right? You're carrying family, you're carrying kids, you're carrying jobs, you're carrying school, you're carrying all these things. And our men are doing the same thing. And so I'm not trying to discount our men, because some of them are strong individuals and they deal with some of these things that we deal with, and discrimination and injustices and all these other things that we don't really talk about when we gather. But you and I know we experience that. When we walk into the store or when we go out into community, we see it, we feel it, but we don't talk about it. And so all of those things, they kind of just pile up on us, right? And I like to use the comparison. I'll say this a million times. Those boulders and those rocks on top of our backs, right? We're just carrying them and they're carrying them and they're stacking up. And so when do you have time to look at yourself and start to pull off those boulders, those rocks, and put those things down so that way you can start to rejuvenate yourself and revive yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? It's really important. And so this question on the screen right here talks about, I don't know if it went off. Oh, wait, no, it's still there. Whenever I start to feel overwhelmed by pain, regret, guilt, or despair, or any emotion, I will blank. When I feel overwhelmed by school, work, children, etc., I will, what is your go-to? How do you cope with these challenging times in your life? I want you to write that down. And this is basically the creation of a self-care plan. It's a simple question. I will go out for a walk, 12 o'clock to 12:15, every single day. I will write all of my thoughts down. from 5 o'clock to 5:15, nonstop. I will go on a 5-hour hike. Yes. I will go for a 5-hour bike ride. I will go to the gym. I will go talk to my auntie while I walk the road for 2 miles down to the main road, right? I know you all have your own ideas, your own ways of doing things, so I'm hoping you wrote that down. Take that with you. Write it in your journal or your paper, post-it note, whatever you keep track of, your phone. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next thing, and that's the resources. Easy peasy if you want any of these items. So we have the 5 stages of grief and loss that I included, and then we also have this toolkit, which is coping with grief and loss. It's basically a workbook that goes into detail about these 5 areas and talks more about the healing process. So if anybody would like this, just let me know and I'll put it in the chat. Um, Otherwise, I want you all to um, recognize that we all have medicine, we all carry medicine, and knowing and understanding that how important you are to loved ones in your life, to being here on Mother Earth, for being a part of this universe, that each one of us carries a piece of that medicine. So I say this in a good way again. You are worthy, you are capable, and you have a choice to make those good choices about your health and well-being, right? You have a right. It's an inherent right that you have to be healthy and well. I'm just going to burn some sage here. And I want you all to take all this information in a good way and incorporate it in your life how you see fit. Take what you need. And if you need to educate others, be my guest. Go back and get the video and share it, or give some of the information to someone who needs it. Be a good relative like that, right? Share. And I want you to know that we've been through a lot in our life, in our families, our communities, our history. We've gone through a lot of different things, and you deserve to make awesome choices in your life. You deserve to build your life the way you see how you want it, right? And to fulfill those goals and objectives or visions that you have for your life, your well-being, your children's well-being, your grandchildren, to continue forward in a good way and live positively for future generations. So I wanted to share that with you, and that's all I have for today. And I say that, and I will turn off the recording. And yes, I have a couple minutes. I'm going to stop all of these things and I'm going to grab the resource for the coping with grief and loss, and I will stay right here. You're welcome to leave, and we will send the survey through email tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that, okay? We really encourage you and thank you for taking those surveys. So yeah, go on it.